We are at Dunwoody College of Technology right now, up in the beautiful Cyber Ridge. You can see what's on the screen, what we're about to be looking at. Presentation on the Elevate AudioWorks app by Frequency Tuning. We've been very blessed and lucky to have this group of students working on us, the cybersecurity piece of this app. One of the perks of working at a very technologically savvy school, I suppose. Got the crew over there. They're getting ready to present. Make sure you guys drop them a thank you in the comments as well. This is going to, what is significantly helping the security side of the app that we have. And they get to learn. They get to test out a real use case, which is kind of fun, especially as this grows over the next year. They'll be able to look back and see some of the effect that what they did had. So, thanks for tuning in. Don't go anywhere. We will get started with the presentation shortly.
You already know my name's Dominic. Good to see you. Our capstone project was presented to us by Dale. The project is to develop a theoretical back end for a binaural application that needs to connect to a majority of the world. Our group consists of Nina, Quinn, Evan, Atticus, and me. Our group adopted this project as if we were approached by a client for a security consultation. Through our processes, we were able to familiarize ourselves with various open source security tools and high-level processes that a real cyber consultant might suggest for use with testing and consulting an application. So with all that being said, Nina will kick us off here with a more in-depth explanation as to what the application is, how it works, and the importance of API security testing for application development.
Okay. We're going to start with the core idea of the app. Our client is building an application that helps users enter a specific mental state, like focusing or relaxation or meditative, by listening to binaural audio while enjoying their favorite music, and it's both therapeutic and personalized. So what exactly is binaural audio? Binaural audio works by playing two slightly different frequencies, one in each ear. When that happens, the brain processes the difference between the two frequencies as a third internal beat called a binaural beat. For example, if the left ear hears 210 hertz and the right ear hears 200 hertz, your brain perceives it as a 10 hertz tone. You're actually not hearing that 10 hertz tone, but your brain is responding to it. These binaural audio beats line up with known brainwave frequencies, and each range has different benefits. Delta waves are good for deep sleeping and healing. Theta is for meditation and creativity. Alpha is for relaxation and learning. Beta is for focus and alertness, and gamma is for cognitive processing. But to deliver the experience reliably and safely, the client isn't just playing with audio frequencies. We're dealing with a lot of sensitive data under the hood, so let's talk about the application security. When we talk about security for this app, we're thinking beyond just protecting the APIs. We're treating this like a modern digital service that deals with real user data and behavior, so integrity and trust are critical. Let's look at what our client is potentially dealing with from a data perspective. The respective client is handling user logins and subscriptions, which means that credential security is a must. They're processing payment information through third-party gateways, so any breach could have financial consequences. They're integrating with platforms like YouTube for user sourcing, and these are high-value targets for attackers. And since the app offers premium binaural content, the client needs to tightly control access so that only paying users can stream certain audio sessions. It's not just about protecting endpoints, it's about preserving trust. If users are relying on the app for focus, relaxation, sleep, any disruption, whether from poor security or unauthorized access, breaks that trust. As theoretical application security consultants, we're focused on risk minimization. That means securing third-party integrations, encrypting sensitive data in transit and at rest, and ensuring subscription logic can't be bypassed. The smoother and safer the experience, the more valuable the product becomes to the users.
All right, so let's talk about some threat modeling and security priorities and threats identified. So starting off with some potential threats, and I want to start off by saying none of this is really finalized either. This is still in the developmental phase, so let's get started. So some potential threats with the application. One is endpoint abuse. Some tools to counteract this would be like Flutter Test or Mockito. Both tools handle both interface requests or responses and error handling from front end to back end of the development phase. Some ideal attacks this prevents is DDoS, which is distributed denial of service, man-in-the-middle attacks, and data exposure. Another one would be broken authentication. Attackers may gain unauthorized access through vulnerabilities within the code or within the application somewhere. Some types of broken authentication attacks would include credential stuffing, which is attackers inject stolen username and passwords in the login forms. Password spraying, which is a type of brute force attack. This is when a malicious user brute force attempts logins using default usernames and passwords. Session hijacking, which is when a hacker takes control of a user session by obtaining or generating authentication session IDs. And lastly, phishing attacks. This is when you trick individuals to reveal sensitive information by attacking as a legitimate entity. These are really common. You can see this through emails, text messages, websites, and it's just an act of trustworthiness. And the goal for this one would be to steal money or accounts or install malware into a device. Lastly, replay attacks on payment verification. So this is when like an attacker intercepts legitimate data, then retransmits it into a gain unauthorized access. This is when intercepting legitimate payment requests to make unauthorized transactions happen. And then on to security priorities. The first one would be like secure token handling, JWT if you've heard it. And that stands for JSON Web Tokens. So an example of this would be HTTPS in a web forum. It'd be like a short-lived access tokens and store and refresh tokens and secure cookies during token transmission. So this would encrypt communication amongst devices that are talking or communicating, and it prevents interception of information. Next would be open authorization. And this is just a standard protocol that allows applications to access a user's personal info. So it's just a permission, for that. And then next would be role-based access control. This is a security model that is used for restricting computer systems to access to authorized users. And I have an image or a picture right here that can really break down what RBAC can do for each job role. So as you can see for the sales job, like a sales rep, they can only access the customer database, but they can't access payroll or code-based information. And if you look at the financial, job role, they can only access the payroll, but they can't access the customer database and the code base. And if you look at the engineering side, they can only access the code base, but they can't access customer database and payroll. Next is input validation and output encoding. So input validation checks if entered user data or source data meets the expected format, type, or range. This prevents errors and security vulnerabilities. An example of this would be the picture right here. As you can see, a user's trying to log in to an example login forum. There are requirements in order to log in, and you can see they meet 3 of the 4 requirements, but the one right here, they don't have a capital letter in their password they're trying to create or enter, so that would not allow them to get into the application itself. Output encoding is the process of transforming data before it's sent to the user. So you could see this with like sending information or sending something to a client. It's an example of that would be like HTML changes. So from like a double quotation, it becomes, it could be like an @ if sent to the client. So both of these are essential to security measures for the web application, and both prevent attacks like cross-site scripting and SQL injection. So on to the next slide. This is the application security testing and development phases. So these are each of the phases roughly that the developers would go through in the creation of this application. So phase 1 is unit testing. The goal for this test is to check individual components, check app functions, and check app models if they work in isolated interfaces. So system components of this from front end is the Flutter. We use that tool. This tests the utility functionality, the app widgets, and token management. Some tools that uses this are some that I've mentioned before, such as Flutter or Mockito. And then for the backend, we use Node.js. This tests the business logic, tests the middleware and the isolated services. Some tools for this would be Jester or Mocha and signin.js. Then for databases, we use MongoDB. This tests the schema validation or the model methods like CRUD or query logic. And for this, we use Jest and Mongo Memory Server, or I should say the programming team will. On to the next phase is phase 2. This is the integration side of the process. The goal for this is to verify the modules if they interact correctly. So from front end to back end, the test would be for request and response or error handling. And then from back end to MongoDB, this would test app interface, route interaction with the database, transferring the data to the database. Phase 3 is end to end. The goal for this was to validate the entire user journey A scenario would this be a user submits an email and a password, then Flutter sends post to backend, like a command for that, and then backend saves the data to the MongoDB database. The backend returns it as success, and then the Flutter shows a confirmation to the developer or whoever's creating the application. And then phase 4 is performance and security testing. The goal for this is to optimize app performance and ensure security. Performance testing, so the system load testing with artillery and K6, and the UI performance checks, they check that using Flutter dev tools. And then for security testing, that's when they'll use like vulnerability scanning, such as using Jest or OWASP Zap, and that checks on dependencies or scanning via Sneak and SonarQube.
All right, now I'm going to walk you through some types of security testing tools. First one we have is a SAST, or a static application security testing. Those are going to be applications like SonarQube and Checksmarks. This type of tool scans your source code and your binaries for typically hard-coded passwords, injection vulnerabilities, and bad coding practices. And then this type of tool is what we used for this project, and I'll get into that tool shortly. Then we have a DAST, which is a dynamic application security testing tool. And that actually runs your app and tests it from the outside, similar to how an attacker would try and test your systems. Now those are tools like OWASP, Zap, and Burp Suite. And then there is something called an IaaS, which is interactive security testing tool, where it actually sits inside your app while it's running, and it gives you live feedback to any vulnerabilities or anything. And then we have a software composition analysis tool, or SEA, similar to Sneak, and this analyzes open source libraries for any third-party vulnerabilities that you might be pulling. As for a highlight for what we used, this is a video of me installing Docker and our tool MobSF. That is short for Mobile Security Framework. It's a free and open source tool for testing your source code. Like I said, this is a SAST, so it's static. It just runs it or scans your code at rest. This is kind of where I struggled the most to get this tool to run. At first, I didn't use Docker, and that proved very difficult to install it on the Kali Linux machine. But once I did some research, I was able to install Docker and run the Docker commands to run it. And once MobSF is running, it sets up a local server, or localhost server, where you can go to the web page and upload your APK file.
Okay, so to start, we were initially given the first version of the APK, but due to our lack of experience in application development, we weren't entirely sure where to go from there. In the early stages, we considered trying a virtual machine running Android or a light app-specific emulator. Although it may have worked, we were made aware of much better software called Android Studio and Appetize.io. We found Android Studio to be relatively difficult to learn, and Appetize has a pretty strict time limitation. Because of this, we ended up testing most of the first version on Android Studio and BlueStack, mainly prioritizing the errors at the login stage. Here are some examples of errors we found in version 1. No errors when failing to create an account with proper restrictions. Any input provided would create an account. Additionally, no specifications of what went wrong in the process. No pop-ups except for passwords did not match. And here is a short demo for version 10 on Android Studio. As you can see, I'm trying to test input validation here. I then create an account and log in, and I'll let it play, and Quinn will cover more of the security issues in the next slide.
Yeah, so this is what MobSF looks like when you're uploading a APK. It takes about 10 minutes or so, so I sped up the video. And once it analyzes the code, it prints everything out neatly into this website where you can go through all of the security layers, and it actually tells you what vulnerabilities there are and recommendations to fix it. And for some findings for version 10, Mr. Dom, yeah.
Yeah, hit the 10.
Oh.
Is this the right thing?
There we go.
There we go. Okay.
All right, so some high severity issues that were found. One was the app was signed with a debug certificate, which we can ignore because it's still in production, or it's still being in development, it's not in production. And another high severity issue that was found was the app uses CBC encryption, which it's vulnerable to a padding oracle attack, which I had no idea what that was, so I did a little research. And the oracle attack, it exploits the way the system responds to incorrect padding during decryption. So the real world implication of this is The type of attack can fully decrypt sensitive data like session tokens or cookies, and this was famously used in the Poodle attack on SSL and TLS. Then some medium security issues. The app can be installed on a vulnerable version of Android. The application data can be backed up, posing a risk to data exposure. And then there's multiple activities related to Stripe, which is the payment service that the app uses. And after we looked through everything, we created a report to send to our clients. In this report, you can see it has screenshots from the tool that we used, a risk assessment, and our recommendations to fix those issues as well. And then after we sent out this report, then we got another APK to begin another phase of testing.
So for version 11 testing stage, we gained access to a premium Appetize subscription. As previously stated, it's a much more user-friendly application and a more direct learning process. From here, we began rigorous testing within the app. Despite any security this platform provided, we had a broader issue being that since Appetize is a self-contained emulator that encrypts all traffic, we were limited on any further API analysis. Again, here are some examples of errors found in version 11. Failed login messages appeared at the bottom of the screen, rendering them invisible for most users. No pop-up when entering and nothing to login screen, no additional account security options. And then this is a brief demo of version 11. You'll notice a bit of an environment change as we switch over to Appetize. Here I use the same account to log in as the first version. As you can see, once I logged in, I select my plan and proceed with testing. I'm showing some of the basic functionalities scrolling through the app, and yeah, I'll let it play out a little more. Right, and then the final version, we were able to do more in-depth testing. We used programs such as Wireshark and MobSF, which were further explained in other slides. Here's some issues found in the final version and general quality of life suggestions. Login limitations were very limited, allowing you to make an account with nearly any unspecified characters such as non-email verification, insecure password, etc. Couldn't use physical or internal mobile keyboard to enter credit card information during the secure payment pop-up. Quality of life fixes, lack of account settings, missing about section, individual subscriptions, missing a select button. And here is a final video of the last version we received. I once again log into my prior account. You can see we're using Appetize again. I show some of the more general app functionality, the music player, categories, volume control, and purchasing of subscription. And I will let that play.
Alrighty. So the security testing went well right after the initial return of our recommendations. The only thing was the debug certificate, but also still being in development. That does not matter. Our recommendations for ongoing security is to test the source code against SAST and DAST tools throughout the phases of development that still yet to come, and contemplate setting up an IOST. There's a tool out there called Contrast Security that has good reviews. And then conduct pen testing and code audits. As far as constraints from this project, while testing the API didn't have an SSL certificate, so we could use Wireshark to see what was going on. However, we ran into issues with Appetize encrypting traffic to the API, so we couldn't really read the data. Some other constraints for this project, it being mock consultation. We could have sat down with the clients a bit more regularly than we did. And then something new that came to us yesterday when we were practicing was a risk of regression. Tom put that on to us where while we were testing, we weren't testing the old tests after we sent back the recommendations. So, for example, we had the report and we sent it over to them, and then we didn't test the old tests on the new version that we got. So that's something that we could have done as well.
Now that you've seen the technical demos, here's a quick recap of the core tools that we used as part of the security consulting workflow. We used Android Studio, which was our primary development and build environment, which is where we analyze the app structure and the behavior at the code level. Appetize.io, which is a lightweight emulator that we used for cross-platform testing and quick UI validation in the browser, great for collaboration and demo purposes. We used MobSF often, where we ran static analysis to identify vulnerabilities in the APK, like hard-coded credentials or insecure configurations before even running the app. We touched on Wireshark to inspect the network traffic, and we used BlueStack, which gave us a sandbox mobile environment for testing real-world usage scenarios from user logon to audio playback and third-party integration. These tools gave us full visibility from source code to runtime behavior and helped us evaluate both security posture and user trust risk across the app. Questions?